Thanks, Trey. Great to see you as well. Thank you, everybody, for taking some time out of your busy schedule to spend it with myself, Trey, and Peter. Peter and myself are part of a team, as Trey had mentioned, called the Trading Strategy Desk, a group of traders who dedicate ourselves to coaching and educating clients on a variety of trading topics, whether that's going to be technical analysis, risk management, trading, maybe some charting and the tools that we offer here at Fidelity Investments. What we want to do here today, our agenda, if you will, is to help educate on the tools we offer for charting specifically on Fidelity.com, as well as to compare and contrast the charting that we offer on Active Trader Pro. This is our flagship trading platform that we have, which we're showing here on the screen share. Peter, the reason I got this pulled up for everybody is just for those folks who maybe have never used Active Trader Pro, maybe never heard of it, never seen it. I want to just show them where they can go ahead and download the platform for today's presentation, and also just to use it in the future if need be. So you go to Fidelity.com to start. We go to Accounts and Trade. That's that top drop-down menu. And you don't even have to be signed in if you don't want to be, and click on Active Trader Pro. Now, from here, you get the landing page. It's going to describe and talk about some of the benefits, the features, the customizability, which is probably the big benefit of this tool for traders. Going to give you all that information, but most importantly for today, how to download it. It's right there at the very top. We try to make it really easy for the clients at home. Download Active Trader Pro. If you click on this, it's going to give you a walkthrough, a download, an installation wizard, if you will. You just follow those steps. You can sign in, use the platform. A few notes on that as well. Again, if you're brand new to this platform, you don't have to pay for it. That's a very common question we get. Like, hey, is there a subscription fee or a cost, or does it change the commission structure at Fidelity Investments? The answer is no, it does not. If you're trading online for stocks, ETFs, just like on Fidelity.com, that's still going to be commission free. It's not going to change your costs in any way. In addition, you can use the same username, same password to sign in. And if you have two-factor authentication for additional security, that feature set will also carry over onto Active Trader Pro. So again, it's going to have the same sign-in process, same credentialing, same access, same commission structure, which is basically free for trading stocks, ETFs online. It's just that it's going to give you some advanced charting capability and customization. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. I'll save that for the second half. Peter, great to see you. I'd like to pass it off to you to talk a little bit more about Fidelity.com and some of the charting that we have available for free there. And then I'll take it back over towards the end and we'll compare and contrast against Active Trader Pro. But it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. I'm looking forward to it. I'm ready to have some fun with this. And I'll grab the screen because, like you had mentioned, where I want to start is Fidelity.com. And I think the biggest part, once again, about being able to jump into a trading platform like you're going to discuss down the road, but also a website like we have on Fidelity.com, is everything it has to offer. Just last week, I had my, 14 years that I've worked at Fidelity, traded with Fidelity before I worked here, years and years and years ago, as you can tell. And over the years and throughout that time frame, the website has evolved. The Active Trader Pro platform has had many iterations. So I think the goal for me, for you, like you and I were discussing high level, what we want to accomplish is really making things actionable, practical, and maybe stick out to many of you out there in the audience to potentially maybe apply this to your own unique trading strategy and style. So first things first, on the website, especially if you are newer to the website, where I have navigated to so far is what we call Chart Plus. This can be found very easily by going to News and Research. About halfway down, our stocks selection would then allow you to pop in a symbol up here towards the top left. So we have Apple on the screen here and now, and starting off with even just a very simplified quote that we are going to be taking a look at. And this could have changed. That is part of the website, is that we can refresh the data that we're observing, but I wanted to leave it here and now. And just to start with, the framing, I suppose, of why use a chart. For some of you that are maybe out there in the audience on the fence about charting, or you hear the word technical analysis, maybe it's a turnoff for some of you, maybe it's why you're here, is to learn more about it. But simply said, if we look at Apple, it's, well, roughly $190 and change. It's up a few bucks for the day. It's about 1.6% or so. Of course, as we know, as it said, that will go ahead and change. We can update that. And the reason that you might want to update some type of quote is to get more information, get more updated information. Just in the time frame that we updated it now, well, it's not quite up as much, but it's still green. And I say that because the evolution of charts itself was just that. It was that we were able to go ahead and view data as traders, as investors, depending on what type of asset class, maybe it was a commodity, you name it, what we would have to do rather than looking at a chart, which is what we're seeing here in the background of price points moving around higher, lower. We have the different axes, of course, that give us the different time frames. We have the price points that are going to tell us where this stock has come from and gone. Now, in a glance, we visually can see this here and now. However, back in the day, kind of putting on my infomercial salesman, why would you want a chart? Well, it's because this is all that we used to have access to. We used to have to take a look and actually see, okay, what was the date? Well, today. What was the closing price? Or at least where is it trading at here and now? And then we would take that a step further. And as traders and investors, we would say, well, I know where it's trading at now, or potentially where it traded yesterday at the close. Where did it open? And then we took it another step or two further. Okay, well, I know where it started the day, the opening price. I know where it finished the day, which was the closing price. How high did it get throughout the day? What was the lowest point that it was throughout the day? And the reason that we began to incorporate more and more data, as well as the volume maybe behind some of those price moves, was we wanted to be able to try to get a gauge on what were the ebbs and flows of the market. And I think that you could take a look. Let's just look at this closing column. If you were to say, okay, well, what did it do the past few days? 190 roughly, 187, 186, 183. You're beginning to, I'm sure, get some type of a grasp on, okay, it seems like the price is moving higher over the past few days. And I wouldn't argue with you. You could also take a look at, well, what did it do not just the past few days? Where was it, quote unquote, a month ago? And you could look back on, well, roughly the middle of April and say it was about $167. Okay, Peter, that's easy enough. It was $167 about a month ago. It's 190 now. That's easy. It's the price has gone higher. But it's harder, at least for my simple mind, to actually absorb all of these different price points, the highs, the lows, the opens, the close, and everything in between, and actually get a gauge for, well, was price maybe moving higher and then went back lower? Was it moving lower and then moved back higher? Which is really, I'll get off my soapbox, why charting, or at least implementing charts, can be so important. And I've heard that from longer term investors that say, well, maybe I don't really want to fuss with what it's doing on a day-to-day basis or week to week. And that's perfectly fair. If you're one of those that maybe even just reviews positions on a monthly or quarterly basis, a chart might be your best friend because it's going to very quickly give you, what do they say? A picture's worth 1,000 words. It's going to go ahead and give you a lot of methodology behind where buyers and sellers were maybe having a tug of war and kind of the characteristics between some of those price moves. Now, that's what begins to get me into the kind of panel of availability that we have here throughout Chart Plus. In the top left, just from a navigational standpoint, there's those same data points we were referring to, the open, high, low, and close, as well as the volume on a certain time frame. And this is going to correspond with where my crosshairs are moving as the mouse cursor is moving along day over day, week over week, month over month, which gets me to that second just navigational standpoint. If you are newer to charts, down here in this corner, you're going to have the ability to change your time frames. If you want to look at something like a 6-month chart, or maybe a 1-year chart, completely up to you. Chase is going to talk quite a bit about the importance of utilizing different time frames, so I'll save that for him. But at least as far as navigation is concerned, this is where we would be concerned with, as well as the frequency, which I'm going to go ahead and leave on a daily frequency, at least for my time. Now, we were able to go ahead off that table view, get more information, get more visual information. We can take that even further as traders or as investors or as technical analysts if you want to take it that far. And I don't want to scare anyone off with that thought process of technical analysis, folks. I'm going to keep it as basic as concepts of support and resistance, maybe concepts of a trend or a trend line, and a couple indicators. So let's start there. If we were looking at this chart, I think many of us could agree that we notice that the price itself here has been moving down. And then once it gets to about, what do we have? About 180 off on the right-hand side of the screen, it maybe finds some support. Buyers come in, push the price higher, drifts a little bit, and then there is more support from buyers pushing the price higher. Just can't seem to continue moving higher, drift again, finding a little bit more support. So I don't need to go much further. What I'm drawing at here, of course, is those concepts of support and resistance. For lack of a better term, it's just where a group of buyers says, you know what, I think there's value here. I'm going to go ahead and push this up, and sellers aren't really getting overwhelmed. Under the draw functionality here towards the top right, I'll talk about analysis in just a moment or two, but under draw, this is where we do, well, just what it says. We can draw anything. We can have fun with this. We can draw everything from arrows to average lines. We can draw different channels. You can, I think I saw doodle on here. That's a newer one to me, not a technical term I learned back in the day, but nonetheless, completely up to you. There are going to be really anything you can think of and more as far as ways to kind of apply your own thought process, your own view on the chart itself, kind of like we're at the drawing board, so to speak, which is why it's called that. I'm coming to a horizontal line here, which is what we're observing. So if I click on horizontal once, well, my mouse cursor is now engaged. I click one time, and what that will do is then drop a line for me roughly at that area. And I'm not going to get too specific with it here, folks, as far as where you see support versus where Chase might or Trey or the next person. That's really going to be up to you. What we're here to do is actually show how to feel comfortable using these tools, and where you want to draw the lines and what helps you make decisions, completely your prerogative and up to you. I would venture to say, however, if you were to poll a number of us in the audience, many of us would say, well, I think that roughly 180-ish line is where I'm seeing some support. So just like that, that's where you can go ahead and draw this horizontal line. And we notice that horizontal line maybe comes into play down the road because once it breaks lower, we notice it has a little bit of a hard time getting higher above that. More to come on that momentarily, but at least as far as the draw functionality, once again, there is a tremendous amount here. Many of us on the desk utilize the rectangle. Sometimes when we talk about drawing a support or resistance line, it's not so fine to the penny. It's more of a zone, or maybe you want to be able to try to identify a certain trading range potentially, which is nothing more than an area of, once again, kind of support and resistance where price is moving back and forth. The point about anything you're looking to draw goes back to that decision making. Is drawing something of this nature helpful to you, or is it just muddying the waters and clouding your screen? That's going to be, once again, completely up to you. But I think the maybe next in line that we do want to cover, frequently asked about, at least I know, Chase, is going to be a trend line. Down towards the bottom here, trend line is also available. Same type of modification. You are engaging it by clicking once. You then click once to engage that line. And now I'm able to go ahead and drag it wherever I see fit. Some technicians and traders would say, well, I'm going to, for lack of a better term, play connect the dots, just like me and my 4-year-old would. Okay, where has there been a high point? Where was the next high point? Where was kind of the next high point? Where you draw these trend lines one last time is completely up to you. And I think it also gets into your time frames, whether you're going to have a longer term time frame in mind where you are concerned with kind of what the price action has been or has been captured under, going all the way back, in this case, towards the end of December through now, or if you're going to be someone who is more concerned about the shorter term trend. Maybe your trend line might actually start with some of these low points, actually then pushing higher up to where we're seeing this now. Now, as I mentioned, Chase is going to talk to us a little bit about the importance of maybe actually looking at not just one single time frame, but incorporating numerous time frames. So I'll save some of that for him to be able to discuss, but at least wanted to go ahead, quote unquote, and kind of show off some of these draw tools that you do have access to. While we're at it, if there is maybe some type of functionality that you want to remove under draw towards the top, you're going to have the ability to undo something that you had done. You can clear all of these drawings all together, or you can remove them one by one by doing a right click with your mouse. That being said, if you hover over what you've drawn, it will also give you some additional details. For instance, this encapsulates, it looks like 42 bars. This trend line encapsulates 98 bars worth of data from left to right. And of course, when I say a bar, what we're referring to is this candlestick or a day versus frequency or period that we are observing. So if I right click on this rectangle because you don't care for it, hey, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. There you go. Out of sight, out of mind. All right, moving along once again, left to right, we've got displays here. Displays really get into different chart settings, for lack of a better term. You've got the ability to incorporate extended hours trading if you wanted to see what pre-market or post-market trading activity has looked like. On certain time frames, you've got the ability to look at that. We're fresh off earnings season. I know that was frequently asked about in many of our sessions, Chase, being able to actually incorporate that extended hours data. Displays is where you're going to be able to do that, and also so much more. Even changing that chart style. I had talked about this candlestick, which is a visual representation of where the open, where the close was, as well as the high and low. But if you were maybe more classically trained, maybe a bar chart, as they're called, is really what you're after. And maybe this speaks to you more than the kind of colorful candlesticks that we were just looking at previously. Once again, personal preference. Some of it is visual aesthetics, but completely up to you. There are more than I could even speak to in the time that we have as far as information that you are able to view. I would say this though, Chase, is just maybe a bit of a caveat in different types of displays, talking about the evolution, not just of a table view, but then also a chart, and then the evolution of something like a line chart that you might see or observe into a bar chart or a candlestick. Folks, everything that at least I'm going to be speaking about, and I'm sure much of what Chase is going to be talking about, is really being able to get a, I guess, better grasp of the price action that we're seeing, the events that took place. Now, by all means, this is a line chart, as it's called. This is going to plot what the closing price was on that daily basis. And would this chart help us out in being able to determine that, well, price action was generally accepted heading lower and is now, at least as of late, began to turn potentially higher? Yes, this line chart would help. However, different displays, as we see here, the line chart isn't really accounting for what technicians call a gap. If we go back to this candlestick, keep your eyes right over here. The candlestick, of course, is going to go ahead and actually incorporate that, showing, you know what, like we had seen on that table view, even that stuck out like a sore thumb. Price action one day was 173, the next day all the way up at 186. That line chart might be a bit misleading to some in the audience that think maybe price just meandered its way higher. A gap of this nature could actually be very, very important, depending if you implement that into your decision making or potentially management style as well. So keep displays in mind. I'll let you and the audience kind of venture that for yourself, encourage you to go through maybe one by one. There's some pretty unique ones out there. Once again, it all goes back to, does it help you make decisions or not? Now, I want to move over to indicators. I'm sure many in the audience have at least heard of some indicator, maybe on the news, moving averages, relative strength index, which is a gauge of momentum, maybe some volatility indicators as well, like Bollinger Bands. If you're not familiar with those names, I'd encourage being able to click on indicators. And what you'll observe is we have our entire indicator library, which we see is checked. What that means is it's going to go ahead A to Z and post every type of indicator that we have access to. And if there's something that maybe you're unfamiliar with, as you hover over it, there's two icons off towards the right-hand side. One, our information. As you click here, it's going to give us a pretty quick synopsis on what that indicator is tasked at doing, or maybe what it's going to be calculated based off of. And if it's something that you want to incorporate, you can very easily click on it. Or if it's something that you maybe want to save for later or utilize on a more frequent basis, we've actually got the ability to go ahead and give it a star. And what that's going to do is actually then put it into our favorites category as well. You can also look at the other categories themselves. I had already talked about moving averages that seem to be very common. Let's stay there just from this framework of making sure everyone feels comfortable adding indicators and then potentially modifying them. If we come to the averages or bands category, we're going to see everything we have access to. You could also search for it freehand, but moving average here down below, going to go ahead and star that so it's added to our favorites and click on it one time. What this is going to do for us is by default give us a 50 period moving average, how it's calculated based off the closing price and the type of calculation. Simple period moving average in comparison to all of these, I would venture to say is going to be the most common, or at least when you hear on the news a 50 period moving average, they're more times than not referring to a simple period moving average. Chase, you and I both know we've got so many sessions on these other types, and there's different indicator guides out there. If you have interest in these folks, feel free to take a look. I'm going to stick with simple moving average just for a moment. When we say a simple moving average with 50 periods based on the close, all that means, in short, is that the indicator itself or the calculation is looking at the previous 50 trading days. What was the closing price? And it's giving us an average. Very easily, we've kind of got our cheat sheet for where price has come and where it's going. There's other ways to modify this if you see fit by color. You name it, completely up to you, your prerogative. And then by all means, when you hit apply, that's going to go ahead and then add that to our screen. Now that is the 50 period, or in this case, once again, we're on a daily average. If you want to have numerous moving averages, you can certainly come right back here, moving average. Many of you out there in the audience may have heard of a 200 period moving average as well. In comparison, what that is doing in contrast is looking at, rather than the last 50 days worth of price action and taking the average, well, now this is actually looking at the last 200 days worth of price action and looking at that average. I'm going to pause there for a moment to at least speak to why is Peter talking about moving averages? I think it goes back a little bit towards the maybe trend line concept or trend in general. A trend is nothing more than looking for a series of higher highs and higher lows, or the opposite, lower highs and lower lows, more like what we're seeing over here. Now, if you are maybe more uncomfortable actually drawing your own trend lines, as I had done before, all the way back here from December, maybe I don't want to draw one from December all the way to now. Maybe Peter was talking about something shorter term. Maybe I should actually back out to a year-long chart and looking at something very, very long term. What is that trend telling us? A moving average is a very simplified way to go ahead and take a look at, depending on the periods you're incorporating in that calculation, that concept, or kind of a cheat sheet. Very simply, if that 50 period moving average is heading lower, well, that tells us that given this calculation, based on those past 50 days, the trend over that period is lower. And same would then be in place for something that's then pointed upwards. Now, there is no shortage of different thought processes, trading systems on price action, either being above or below moving averages, maybe even moving averages and how they relate to each other. If a shorter moving averages crosses above or below a longer moving average, but that's a little above and beyond the scope of what we're looking to talk to here today. Really, what I wanted to say is when we're looking at a chart, whether we're adding trend lines of various lengths or degrees, whether we're adding moving averages of various lengths or degrees, really what we're trying to do, going all the way back to that table view, is just give us a very quick and easy way to view and absorb that information without actually having to come back to a table and take a look at, okay, well, what was the moving average today in comparison to the close? Okay, what does that look like? This graph view, once again, for someone like myself, who's famously a very slow reader, but can take in a picture very quickly, absolutely loves being able to incorporate charts and the ability that we give ourselves in order to go ahead and begin to incorporate different drawn objects like trend lines, horizontal lines of support or resistance, as well as moving averages. And then when you actually begin to see that some of these converge, almost like this support that then maybe showed its hand at support again, testing this 200 period moving average, temporarily at least moving higher. Jury's still out, but maybe that helps someone longer term, short term, make decisions or maybe manage risk, which is really all that we're about here on the strategy desk. Two last things I wanted to leave it with, and then Chase, I do want to open it up to you, given the time that we have here and now, was if adding these moving averages, if drawing this is still a little bit too much for you, so to speak, no slight to anyone's intelligence, but you're confident on how to use them. Maybe you're just not as comfortable doing it for yourself quite yet. By all means, you've got the ability to go ahead and actually, let's go ahead and clean this up. But what I like to say is you can let the system kind of do the heavy lifting for you. And what I mean by that is if you come here to events, there's an algorithm in the background that's actually going to be scanning for a number of different things, whether it's chart patterns, whether it's different types of oscillating indicators, whether it's indicators in general. And if you were to click on, let's just say indicators, for instance, what that is going to do now for us in the background is do a scan. And if you hover over some of these indicators, what you'll observe is you can click on the actual dot itself. And the beauty of that is it's not only going to go ahead and give you a little bit of a tutorial or education on what it is that we're seeing off towards the left-hand side. This is one of those double moving average crossovers. Maybe you're interested in it. This is how you can very quickly learn a bit more about it. And then without you having to do the legwork of adding those moving averages, it's going to go ahead and plot that for you and actually highlight specifically that indicator that it was referring to. And that's going to do that for a number of different types of indicators. Here is one that's just the 200, completely up to you. But Chase, I like to kind of show that because one, you don't necessarily yourself have to add every single indicator, hoping you remember what you learned about it. Once again, taking some of that mental fatigue off yourself and allowing the computer to do some of that heavy lifting for you, I think is a great immersive way to be able to actually incorporate this and then have it drawn for you without having to really lift more than a finger. The last thing I'll leave us with is the other thing that's been incorporated into our objects is going to be this analysis tab, which I glossed over there to begin with. What this will do is actually go ahead into a bit more of that technical tilt of things. It's going to go ahead and try to give a bit of a preference and also some different indicators, which is provided by Trading Central as to maybe where they are actually seeing different areas of importance, whether it's support or resistance, which are beginning to show up on the screen here and now, whether it's different types of indicators that they speak to, like that relative strength index. Here we have a MACD, as well as those moving averages, and they will actually go ahead and pin that to the chart for you as well. Now, taking a step back, I know that looks like a lot here and now, but very quickly, it's a tremendous way to be able to learn on the fly, or at least have some type of framework from professionals in the industry that are looking at where support is, or at least in their minds where it is, and then also having alternatives. If that support were to falter, maybe where are the next areas of importance or zones that they would be looking towards? Doesn't make it right, doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Once again, I think in trading, it comes back to where your framework is, where you're going to look for opportunities, but then also be trying to manage risk, which is why being able to now implement this into the charts versus having to come to our research reports, which are great, but having the ability to have them right here, I think, goes leaps and bounds above and beyond what we had access to when I started way back when, which I find a luxury these days and perhaps take for granted, and I shouldn't. So wanted to at least show off that as far as the left to right thought process from what Chart Plus has to offer. Hopefully you found that helpful, or potentially maybe some areas that you'd like to learn more about sometime soon. Now, Chase, I know here at the halfway point, you've got a lot to talk about. You're also going to go ahead and show some of what Active Trader Pro has to offer in comparison to Fidelity.com. So I want to open it up to you, kind of gain some of your perspective as well.
Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate that. Yeah, fantastic job demonstrating some of the capability of the charting we have on Fidelity.com. What I want to do at this point is contrast that a bit to Fidelity Active Trader Pro. You know, one of the first things I think of, the first word that comes to mind is going to be customizability. Peter, you did a fantastic job of showing how we can add a simple moving average. We can do some drawings. We can use those third-party tools that we've incorporated from Trading Central or whoever else that we may use tools from. But we can't reshape the chart. We can't necessarily nickname them. We can't have all of these charts open simultaneously on the same page. And I think that's where the customizability of ActTrader Pro really shines, as well as the data is going to be streaming. It's as real time as we can get it, you know, depending on the speed of your internet connection and all things considered. So let's hop into it just a bit here. Let's go into ActTrader Pro and look at some of those differences. First thing first is, how do I pull up a chart if you're brand new? Up at the very top here in the gray section, it says charts. Now, Peter, myself, the trading strategy desk at large, we have a bunch of custom charts we've saved in this test account. So you'll see a lot of these here. However, if you're brand new to the platform, or even if you've been using it for a while, you likely won't see this. What you will see, what you should focus on, is where it says new chart. So when you open this up, you get a floating box. And as a bonus tip, most tools that you open in ActTrader Pro are going to appear somewhere in this top left corner. So the chart will appear. And from there, we can make a bunch of changes to our chart, which I'm going to cover right now. I've already got some things prepared, so we'll close out of that one, but that's how you access it. It's charts, then new chart, and you get a pop-up. Okay, first things first, we can reshape and we can resize this chart if need be. So I can left click on the edge, hold and drag to resize it horizontally. We can resize it vertically if we'd like to. Also, depending on your screen real estate, how big you have the platform on your computer at home, whether you use one big monitor, if you have a couple of different monitors or screens, that's totally fine. We can also maximize the chart, or any given tool really, to fill up the space and then customize it even further. I'll keep this pulled up for just now, and we'll walk through some of these features left to right. I want to orient all the traders and investors looking at this, how it's similar to Fidelity.com, but there are some differences. So number one difference is the way that this is laid out at the bottom. We do have the time frame selections. So today, 2D is for 2 days, 5D is for 5 days, 1M, 1 month, et cetera, et cetera. We have that frequency. Peter brought this up. So he was taking a look at that chart on a daily frequency. But if we click the drop down, we can choose weekly, monthly, quarterly, or even something shorter or custom, which we'll talk about a little bit later. In addition to that, we can alter how much time we're seeing within our chart by sliding or zooming in and zooming out. So the way that we do that is in the bottom left-hand corner, we have this little caret or this arrow. If I click on this, it's going to give us this almost transparent view of the chart. And if I left click, hold, slide, and release, this will either zoom in or zoom out on the price history that we're seeing up and above. Notice the frequency still stays the same, but we're just changing how much we're seeing. It's kind of a way to just make the bars, the candlesticks bigger to zoom in and zoom out, get more context. There's another way we can do this as well. If we minimize this for just a moment, up in the top right-hand corner of the chart, we have a zoom in and zoom out magnifying glass. So if I click zoom in, let's say I want to choose this middle section. I'll left click, hold, slide, and release. And there we go. It zooms us right in. Notice how if I come back down to this section, that little transparent view will now be set to the distance we zoomed in. Of course, we can customize it back that way, or just use the demagnification magnifying glass to zoom out, and we'll get back to that original view. Now, very, very common question we get about ActTrader Pro. What do these little arrows mean on the side to the right and at the top and bottom? So these arrows, if I hover my mouse over, I get this vertical line that appears. Now, if I left click, I hold and I slide, let's say to the left, this is going to shift price through the time that we see backwards. So it's going to move it out of the way, move it to the left. And so what we're left with is this blank space to the right, which is the future. Now, what is price going to do? We don't quite know. We're going to have to wait to find out. But this is important. We'll come back to this in just a moment when it comes to adding drawings and technical indicators. But very, very common. If you ever attend one of our classes on the trading strategy desk, you'll see us do this all the time, shifting some of the pricing leftward and rightward. Now, we can do this as well with the horizontal line. If I put my mouse over the top here, notice how it appears. Left click, hold, and I can slide or drag it up or down, and this will condense price. So again, this is that additional layer of customizability. We can squish price, we can zoom in, we can zoom out to get this chart to fit however that we might need it to. And there's a variety of reasons why that might be. If you're looking at something that's going to be chaotic or erratic or very volatile in its price action, let's say a binary event such as earnings, an FOMC announcement, a product release is coming up, you may want to squish price down and slide it over to the left to see the future so that if some big unexpected or maybe expected move occurs, you can see that on the scaling of price. So just something to note. Now, once we've got our familiarity with the chart time frame, how to zoom in, how to zoom out, how to change this, let's go in a little bit further. We'll go to a 6-month daily chart, and we're still on these bar charts, or OHLC, these open, high, low, close. But let's go ahead and change that along with a few other settings. The way that we do that is within the chart itself. We have this settings button. If we click on it, we get a pop-up box. Now, similar to what Peter was talking about, we can change this in a variety of ways. We can use a line chart, which will connect the closing prices, but we can use the more, at this point, industry standard, which is a candlestick filled type chart. In addition, again, this is totally user preference. One of the benefits of ATP, Active Trader Pros, you get to actually utilize your preferences on this chart in this platform. I don't like these grid lines. Personally, I find them distracting, so I'll just reduce or remove them altogether. So I have a clean background. Now, in addition to this, we have a few other settings that are displayed here. We can show tabs. I'll talk about the tabs in just a moment. Show volume chart. So do you want to be able to see volume at the bottom? For now, we'll remove it just so we can focus on price. Go ahead and hit apply. And now we've customized this chart just a bit more to our liking. Now, what else can we do? A lot of this is going to mirror Fidelity.com, so I won't spend a ton of time here. But Peter, if someone wants to draw, we have similar capability here in Active Trader Pro. So click on draw, a variety of tools, the barbell icon, that's what I call it, looks like one to me. This indicates for our trend line. Similar functionality, if I left click to activate it, my mouse looks slightly different. It's got that barbell icon underneath it. I can left click, hold, drag, and then release. This will draw that line. Now notice I can draw this line out into the future, into the blank space off to the right. If I slide this back over here, let's say we put current day pricing right at the end. Notice how it ends here. But I can slide this out so that my drawings extend into the future. So why is this important? Why could this be helpful for a trader? Well, let's go ahead and draw a different trend line. And again, these are trend lines that are completely subjective to the trader. Use whatever you think is appropriate, whatever you're seeing on the chart. But as an example, you might see or identify as a trader some kind of uptrend, maybe something like this, and you want to extend that into the future. If I left click once, we can customize the line. So what color is it? How thick or style of the line? And in this case, do I want to extend it to the right? If I hit apply, it's going to draw that line in perpetuity into the future. Now, again, we have no idea what's going to happen with price action, but we can start to create a technical thesis or a plan and say, hey, maybe I'm expecting a stock X, Y, and Z to stay above this line, which I've now drawn into the future. If it stays above the line, maybe I'll stay in my trade. But if it breaks beneath the line, that's going to be a signal to me, a catalyst to either close my position, change my position, maybe place some kind of risk management order in place. And so that's why I think a lot of traders love utilizing this feature where you can look into the future, if you will, of blank space for your drawings. You can set things out there and have that plan active and ready to go from a visual perspective. Okay, back to the draw for just a moment. Of course, there's other functionality such as a horizontal line. If you want to click and add just a horizontal support or resistance level, you certainly can do that, of course, here. Notice you'll start to accumulate many lines the more that you draw and mark up your chart. If you want to get rid of them, there is a clear all button. You can go ahead and click that. Okay, indicators. Similar but different to Fidelity.com. What I like about this is you can hover over any indicator, and before you left click on it, it's going to give you a preview of what it looks like on the chart. Now, once you're ready, you can go ahead and left click. That will lock in the indicator and add it to your chart. Of course, you can have many different indicators. This average true range is going to be what we refer to as an understudy. It presents itself beneath price action. You were showing us earlier, Peter, how to add a simple moving average. This does have a search feature, so we can type in SMA for simple moving average. We can add that to the chart, and here it is as well. So great customizability. Again, we could still add those indicators that we might need or want to assist us with the analysis. The events section, this is definitely interesting if a company reports earnings. You may want to know when that occurs to make better sense of the historical context of why a chart moved or a security or an indice moved in the way that it did. So if I left click on it, we can see earnings with these little triangles indicating when they occurred, and we can see the subsequent action after each event. This is a really interesting tool. We have the comparison. So let's say you want to compare a security, an indice, whatever it may be, to something like the S&P 500. Well, we can go ahead and compare that. Now, this is going to measure simply price performance, not total performance. So please keep that in mind. But we can chart these two things against each other through time. And if we want to look for any correlations or lack thereof, we can choose this dual axis comparison. So now we've got pricing axis on one side, and we have a pricing axis on the other to see if there's any kind of relationship. How strong is a relationship, if any? Is it inverse? Is it positively correlated? These are just things that we might want to know as a trader. Of course, for now, I'll go ahead and remove this comparison. So you have this little bubble icon right here. If I left click once, I can delete. Note that most things that you add to this chart, whether it's a simple moving average or a technical indicator down below, if you see this bubble, if you left click, there's always going to be some additional step you can likely take, whether it's to modify, add an indicator sourced off of the indicator, or you can remove it. For example, if you wanted to add an indicator on an indicator, not to get too complicated here, we could add a simple moving average of the average true range indicator. So just a way to simplify and average out to smooth the ups and downs that the original indicator was giving us, for example. So again, a lot of customizability within this tool. All right, technical analysis. This is similar to what Peter was showing. If you're someone who's not necessarily confident in adding your own moving averages or your different indicators or looking for different patterns and events, we have a tool that can help you with this. If I click on technical analysis, I go to patterns and events. When this pulls up, we can then tell this third party that we're using here, I want to screen for short-term, intermediate term, or even longer term somethings, whether it's a pattern, a candlestick multi-bar, sort of event, different oscillator indicators, whatever it could be, we can screen for that on this chart. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and hit select all. You hit apply. It's going to request the event data and load in real time and see if anything's happening. So if we look here on this chart, there's a bunch of these little indicators. I'll zoom in, these icons, if you will. And if you hover over them, similar to the chart plus, it tells you, hey, there was some kind of double moving average crossover. Is it red? Is it indicating bearish? Is it green? Is it indicating bullish? I can go ahead and click the add to chart. It's then going to draw that for us through time. Here's that double moving average crossover once again. Add that to the chart. We can see it right here. It's calling it out. So by no means do I want to make that complicated. The point here is we can make this as simple or as advanced as possible. That customizability of ActTrader Pro is quite nice. Peter, I want to take a step back. This is a lot that we've been customizing within this single chart, but I think it wouldn't be doing a full service to ActTrader Pro if we didn't cover more than just a single chart. What else might we utilize charting for here in ATP? Well, we might actually have multiple charts. So let me resize this for just a moment. And in my tools in use, down here in the bottom right, this is going to show us anything that we have minimized within the platform, okay? And what I have is a bunch of charts pre-prepared for us, and I've set them up almost like in a quadrant type style. Now you might say, well, why would anybody need this? If you're a technical trader, you may not want to flip through back and forth all these different time frames, right? You might be on this chart and say, hey, 6 month, 3 month, 5 day. You're clicking back and forth, back and forth. What if you want a variety of indicators for different time frames? What you cannot do on Fidelity.com quite easily is this, having multiple charts all completely separate in terms of their setup together at once. So you may have a daily chart pulled up. Then over here to the right, I have a today chart. So this is intraday with a 5-minute frequency. So each candlestick in this case is not a day, it's not a week, it's 5 minutes. We've gone ahead and we've added a simple moving average. It's a 20 period with a 1 standard deviation Bollinger Band. So totally customized here. The next chart is a 15-minute frequency that we've then customized and changed to 30-minute. So we have a 30-minute frequency here on a 5-day time frame. Moving forward even further, we have another intraday. This is 10 days worth of information, but a 65-minute frequency. This is actually a custom frequency that you can choose. If you click the drop-down arrow, you can type in your custom intraday frequency here in minutes. The idea is simply being on the 65. If there's 390 minutes of trading within a day, 65 minutes goes into that 6 times. So you get 6 individual candlesticks per day. Now you might be asking yourself, well, Chase, what are all these gray bars or gray periods of time? That's the extended hours. So in our settings, if we go back to the settings box, we can check a box to say show extended hours. Now, this can be very important because if there's an economic announcement, some kind of major report, if there's a product release or earnings from a corporate earnings perspective, those often come out pre-market or before the standard session opening or after market. So by clicking the extended hours, Peter, we can go in and see exactly what is happening before the market opens. If you're looking at a very liquid security or maybe an indice, you can also see how that trading almost connects to itself through time, maybe eliminating some of those gaps that you might otherwise not really understand why they're occurring. Now, there's another reason why we might have multiple charts here. And again, you can customize this however you want. You could have only 2 charts side by side. You could have 6 charts. The system is very robust in what it will allow you to do for customizability. But you might also just say, hey, I want to look at a longer term trend. So here's a maximum chart of Apple with a monthly frequency and a 12-period simple moving average. The idea is this is going to give us a 1-year rolling average of price through time. Now, I think anybody who looks at this chart is going to say, wait a second, does this look very proportional or sustainable? Look at this rally over the past couple of years, decades even. But again, I would caution the trader to take a look at our settings. If we click settings, we go in here, we can change our pricing axis to logarithmic. What this setting change does for us is to better understand how significant movements of price are through larger spans of time. Suddenly, when we do this, we realize, oh, wait a second, a $5 movement in the stock way back when might have been significant, but a $5 movement now when it's much higher in price may be less significant on a percentage basis. So you may want to compare a long-term chart, see if we're next to any meaningful support or resistance or a trend line, and then immediately go into a shorter term chart because maybe you're an intraday trader, but you want to be aware of that next closest and maybe even furthest trend that could affect the security that you're trading. One other thing I want to point out here, Peter, when it comes to the functionality of these charts with an ATP, especially if you have a whole bunch of them. Of course, you can look at individual securities, but oftentimes, again, if you're using this type of mental process of linking or creating a narrative across multiple timeframes at the same time, is you can link those charts together. So up at the very top left corner of our chart, we can link to gray. This is the default color. If we set all of these tools, link to gray, we'll come down to this one here at the bottom, link to gray, and then one more. What this does for us is it makes sure all of these individual charts are now linked or synced up together. So any symbol that I type in here will change across all of them at the same time. So we can put in a broad-based indice if we want to. We can go back to an individual stock. And notice, folks, it's going to change all at the same time. This is just one of the benefits of ActiveTrader Pro is how customizable these charts are. You can really start to look at it from a technical perspective and weave together a narrative. What are we doing on the longer term? Okay, what are we doing maybe on an intermediate term? How about the shorter term? And you can start to take a look and compare and contrast these different trends to then create your plan, your trading thesis. What am I going to do? Am I bearish? Am I bullish? Well, the short-term trend looks like this, but the intermediate term looks like this. And you can start to balance. You can use that full weight of evidence approach to say, on balance or overall, is this thing more bullish, more bearish? Which way is it leaning technically? What are the charts showing me so I can make an informed decision? Peter, this is just, again, like I was saying earlier, one way that we can utilize ATP is to set up a bunch of these different charts. However, I would be remiss if I didn't add this last point to the charting capability. Let's say you add all of this to your layout with an ATP. So you've got 1 chart, 2 chart, 3, 4. Next time you pull up the platform, if you want everything to be here, there's a few things we're going to want to save. So aspect number 1 to save is the individual chart characteristics. So this chart has its own setup. I've got 3 different tabs. And as a side note, if anyone wants to know how you can customize a tab, you click this little plus sign. It says new tab. It's going to have some default settings, and you can change those settings within the settings box that we talked about earlier. So you can change the type of chart, the scaling of it if you want extended hours. And if you double click in here, you can go ahead and change the name if you'd like to. So even within a single chart, you can still customize it quite a bit. But let's say you go ahead and you set this all up the way that you like. Go and click this floppy disk icon. For those of you who knows what that is, right? We don't use them anymore, but thing of the past, we're still trying to save what we've done on the chart. I can't say this enough. I've spoken to so many clients over the years who painstakingly set up, after hours of work, a chart just the way that they want. They close out of ActiveTrader Pro and they don't save it. You're going to have to redo all of that work. So click on the floppy disk save icon. Again, our team has a bunch that are already pre-saved, and click save chart. Now, when you do this, you can name the chart whatever you'd like. You can make it your default chart. But most importantly, you can save what matters, the chart settings, the indicators, events, time frame, and frequency. So I would encourage anyone who's going through this process to do that. The second step is, now that we've got 4 charts as an example, within our overall ATP layout, we want to make sure that we save the layout too. So the way that we do this manually is up at the very top. It says layouts. You click on this, you find the layout that you're on, which is indicated by this check mark, and you hit save. That's the manual way to do this. The simple way is if you go up to your settings in ATP, we go to general, and then within this, at the very bottom left corner, auto save layout. You can either have each of those changes made to your overall setup to save. You can have it prompt when you go to close the platform, or you can not have it save and you have to go ahead and manually do it every single time. Peter, what I encourage traders, especially after the years of experience of unfortunately seeing people not save it, lose that progress, is to set it to automatically save so that each time you make a change, it's going to lock that in, especially if you're moving your charts all the way around from left to right, maximize, minimize to suit your needs. So I hope that's a pretty clear comparison between some of the similarities, and there certainly is a lot of them, between Fidelity.com, Chart Plus, and ActiveTrader Pro. But it's also going to be some of the differences, the streaming, real-time quotes, the level of customization, the fact that we can have 4 different charts synced together and changing all these different symbols and time frames for maybe a more collective approach from a technical analysis perspective. Trey, I want to hand it back to you. I know we're starting to wrap up this session here in case there's any questions or things that you want to maybe put a close on this session and make sure if clients are feeling good with their next steps when it comes to either ActiveTrader Pro or Fidelity.com for charting.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Chase and Peter. Really appreciate it. I did get a ton of great questions here. I think one of the top voted questions was comparing active trader pro to trading dashboard. So we appreciate you summarizing that at the end. Let me ask you both just a quick question. This is a common question that comes up in a lot of our technical analysis webinars. And this chart that you're on, Chase, is probably a great example. On here, we're looking at a number of different time frames, right? You've got your 5-day chart, your yearly chart. One of the top voted questions we have right now was, what is the best length of time to help identify maybe a pattern? And maybe just your overall thoughts if a trader's thinking about which time frames to look at, any general thoughts they should have, and how do they help narrow down which time frames to look at?
Yeah, Trey, that's a good question. One of the biggest determinants of what time frame you want to use to look at patterns or events or trends is what kind of trader are you? If you're a longer term trader, or maybe you're even more of an investor, if we can use that word, right? You can kind of think of trading versus investing on a spectrum. If you're more of a long term investor who just happens to make a tactical investment here and there that you may not want to hold for decades and decades, but hey, I'm happy to hold it for a few months. You may just, by definition of the kind of investor or trader you are, look at a longer term chart. You might be more concerned with longer term trends. If you're someone who's a day trader, intraday trader, or a short-term swing trader, yes, it's still good to understand what's happening in the longer term because those long-term trends certainly are going to have an impact on those short-term trends. But the main thesis or takeaway of your plan is likely going to be biased towards the shorter term. So it's not necessarily which chart is best, which time frame is best. It's more of a question of what tool is most appropriate for the job you're trying to accomplish. If you're a short-term trader, you're probably looking at a short-term chart. Now, whether that's 5-minute versus a 30-minute frequency on a 5-day or intraday, that's where it's the trader's discretion. We would encourage a trader to maybe look at the history of whatever stock, ETF symbol that they're looking to trade, and just do at least some loose back testing on a time frame to say, what kind of signals would I get with my proposed system if I'm using a moving average on a short term? What's the win to loss ratio, the profit to loss? Like, what does that look like historically? And am I comfortable with that moving forward? But yeah, simply put, you want to choose the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a hammer to try to put a screw in. You're going to use a screwdriver, right? So ultimately, we want to make sure that we're choosing a short-term chart if we're a short-term trader. Yeah, long-term chart, long-term, and then maybe just supplementing between the two to check all those different trends.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chase, for covering that one. With that, though, we are at time. I just want to take a moment to thank Peter and Chase again for joining us and the great presentation. Thank you to our audience as well. We appreciate you joining us and all the questions that you've asked here today. Sorry if we couldn't get to all of the questions for you, but keep in mind, Chase and Peter are hosting a full 1-hour session tomorrow just dedicated to answering questions, right? So no pre-planned agenda. They're here to help out and cover some of those questions, show some additional examples. If you're interested in that, you can click the button below the viewing screen. As a reminder, you can find all of their upcoming coaching sessions and classroom sessions at fidelity.com/coaching. A ton of great information on there to continue your education on charts. But of course, as you can see, a lot more topics out there as well. So with that, we will close it up from here. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next one. All right. Bye-bye.